Welcome to the Love That For You podcast, where every week you're invited to dream big, laugh often, and celebrate the extraordinary stories of those who inspire. Your story matters, and I love that for you. Hey friends, before we jump into our conversation, I just wanted to remind you, if you don't know already, I actually host another podcast called Queen City Connect. This is a podcast that celebrates the dreamers, the doers, and the change makers of Charlotte, North Carolina. If that sounds like something that would interest you, I would love for you to go check it out on any podcast platform, even the one you're listening to right now. We would absolutely love that. Give it a like, give it a subscribe, rate and review, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. We also have an Instagram page that you can follow along to see who all of the incredible small business owners and nonprofits and creatives that make up Charlotte, North Carolina are at. So if that sounds like something you would enjoy, we would love for you to listen in. Thanks, everyone. I am so excited to announce a brand new sponsor for the podcast, Sort and Store. Okay, Erin is one of my very good friends. She started this company, Sort and Store, and I can personally vouch that they're amazing, not only because I see the work she does, but I have hired her personally to come into my home and help me organize multiple spaces. When I asked her what she wanted to share about her business on this podcast, here's what she said. Between running a business and two busy, sports-loving girls all over the state, I know firsthand how quickly clutter can become chaos. By creating long-lasting organizational systems that are easy to maintain, we've been able to create routines that make it easy to restore the peace and enjoy our home, allowing our family to spend more time doing the things that we love. At Sort and Store, we strongly believe your home should be your refuge and sanctuary, not your cause of stress. Our mission is to help busy families overcome the overwhelming spaces in their homes, giving back the time to spend on the things that matter most. Mention Queen City Connect or Love That For You when booking and receive $50 product credit to the Container Store to be used towards your session. Well, Sarah Bragg, welcome to the Love That For You podcast. I'm so excited.
I'm happy to be here too.
It's a party. It's always a party. And what is fun for today's episode and getting to talk to you is that we are new friends. So I feel like our friendship is going to form as we get to just talk to each other. So
listen, my goal in everything is to make friends. Like, I've realized this about me. I'm like, if I have a conversation with you, I'm like, yeah, we're friends, right? Like, so I'm surprised when people don't want to be friends. I'm like, wait, what? You didn't get the memo that we're now friends, like, for life? So I'm happy to be friends.
We weren't planning on this being like an every Tuesday we meet at 1:00.
Right.
My bad. That's on me.
Right. You have a new co-host with this show.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly. That's so funny. Okay. Well, before we start talking, let me just kind of like read over your bio because you've done a lot and I want people to know. So you are living now in Tennessee, but you did live in Georgia, which we're going to talk about for a second because I also lived in Georgia for a second and very familiar with just like small town Marietta, like that whole area. So we'll chat about that.
You know it all.
Yes. Okay. You produced and hosted the first 2 seasons of the Raising Boys and Girls podcast.
Yes.
That is so cool. You're an author. Your brand new book. Well, you have another book called A Mother's Guide to Raising Herself. And your new book is Everyone Happier Than Me, which I told you before we started recording. I finished reading the entire book and everyone needs to read this. I don't feel like it's just for like one specific person. And I also needed it like right now in my life. So I can't wait to just like dive into what that is all about because it's something that I'm sure we're all thinking in the back of our minds is like, am I doing this right? Am I doing the right thing? Is everyone accomplishing more than me? I feel like I don't have purpose. Do I need to change it up? Do I need to quit? All the things. So you were very courageous and obedient and like did the work and wrote the book. And now we all just get to like highlight every page of it. So that is your like professional career and everything that you're doing and you're speaking and you're doing so much. But I'd love to hear you just kind of give a little backdrop of your story, who you are, where you came from, leading to the work that you've done today.
Oh my goodness. Well, first of all, did you live near Marietta?
Yes. Okay. So I lived in Lilburn, Duluth, Lawrenceville area.
Yes.
And I had a lot of friends that lived in the Roswell area. So I would go over to Roswell, Marietta, that area to like visit friends. But I was living in Duluth and then Lawrenceville. I worked in Lilburn. So just kind of that whole pocket. So.
Oh, for sure. Well, and of course, Atlanta claims everybody. You could be an hour from like the heart of Atlanta. And we're still all like neighbors. That's essentially what it is.
Yes. Oh, I rarely ever went in like downtown Atlanta. I was always just in my little small towns, but I loved it. So,
did you move out of that area too?
yeah. So I was reading in your book, you're like, then we, post COVID, we're moving back to our hometown. And I did the exact same thing. Post COVID, I was like, okay, what am I doing? I had a huge shift in my career. And so I moved back to Charlotte, North Carolina, where I am now, which is where I grew up. So just kindred spirits.
I know so many people, several close friends that did the same thing. Like COVID, I think just in general turned everybody's world upside down, made you rethink things, recalibrate all the things. And I think we're still just kind of reeling from that whole year, really. Yeah. So I feel that. Well, how long do we have? How far have I come? No, I have two. I'm married to Scott. We've been married. This year will be 19 years. And we have two girls. Sinclair she's turning 16 any minute now. And then Rory is wrapping up. She's about to be 14. So she's wrapping up middle school. So we are ready to be out of the middle school years. I'm ready to shut that phase of life and we move on forward. And so, gosh, I've just been on this path of writing and being a communicator. I think if you could have asked me when I was probably 20 what I wanted to be, I would have said I wanted to be the co-host of the Regis. And at that point it was Kathy Lee, morning show. They were having like a nationwide search for the co-host. And of course, Kelly Ripa got it, obviously she's been great at it, but that was like my dream job. So I've always loved the opportunity to talk to people, like I said, to be friends with people. I love connecting. And so I really feel like my whole path has been kind of centered on that, finding ways to do that sort of thing. I even worked in minor league baseball when I began because I love sports, love baseball specifically. And again, it was in public relations. Clearly, I love to talk and loved people. And so I've just kind of been on this path of doing different things that have developed me as a writer and a communicator. And in the last probably 10 years, it's been, developing the podcast Surviving Sarah. And I've taken part in other podcasts as well. And just kind of flexing those muscles that I love of talking to people and being curious and connecting with people. And then just writing books. I always laugh. I write in a very vulnerable way because I just want someone else to know that they're not alone. Like you're not the only one thinking these things or feeling this way. And so the last couple of books that I've written had just been from a place of hey, here's where I am. Here's what I've been learning. It's may not be all the right answers, but we're figuring this out. And so that's really the heart behind how I write, is because I want you to feel the way that you just said you felt I needed this and this is where I am. And someone's coming and sitting beside me as I'm sitting in these hard places right now. So that's really just I do a lot of different things. My family actually owns a wedding venue. So we do a little bit of that too. So I just kind of do it all, I guess.
That's incredible. Okay. Well, when I started my photography business, went full time with it, I was doing primarily weddings. I've slowly stepped out of it a little bit, but hey, if you ever need a pinch hitter in Tennessee at your wedding venue, you let me know.
Come on over.
That's incredible. Okay. So what fueled the love of baseball? Did you grow up playing baseball? This is a totally irrelevant question, but I'm just curious.
I know. I've often wondered that because my family are not big baseball fans. And so I'm not really sure how it began, other than I can remember being very young and my parents took me to a Atlanta Braves game. This was when it was Fulton County Stadium. So back in the day, and Dale Murphy was their main player. And I just fell in love. I had the life-size poster that you could measure your height on. I had that in my room, and I'm a very competitive person. And so my brother, who is almost 4 years older, I don't know why, he was a Yankees fan. And it just even as a 7-year-old Sarah, I did not appreciate that. And so there was just this rivalry from this. I don't even know where it came from. Again, I've asked my parents, and my dad's I never liked really baseball. I mean, I don't talk about baseball. He was a football fan. And so I don't know. It just was that game. It just hooked me. And I've just loved baseball ever since.
Yeah. And you mentioned in your book, you're an Enneagram 3, and I love the Enneagram. I'm a 7. Okay. So I feel a little bit of that competitiveness in I am a very competitive person, but it's probably not motivated by like, I've got to end up on top as much as it's just like experiencing the whole process of the competitiveness with the other person, if that makes sense.
Yes. I feel like the 3 in me wants to just like, I've got to win. I've got to be the best. I'm, working on that in therapy.
Yeah, no, girl, I get it. I used to be a camp counselor for 4 summers. Like while I was in college, I would spend my summers being a camp counselor. And several times, it's honestly embarrassing. I would be pulled into like our director's office and he'd be like, you're too competitive. You are taking these games too seriously. This is about the kids. You're like the leader. We need you to calm it down. I feel like I'm finally at a point in my adulthood that I can like express that happened because I'm like, you're right. I do need to tame it.
I love it. I'm like having pictures of you, like with like bandanas on your head, like with like markings on your face, like out for like blood.
Exactly. I'm like, you will memorize all of your Bible verses because we have to win the week. And they're like, this is not the purpose of that. So, oh man. Okay. Well, it's super neat to hear you talk as well about just the different facets that you've had of like speaking and writing and even public relations for minor league baseball and how we can use all of our skills. And I feel like this honestly ties back to your book of like, we're all searching for, do I matter? What is my purpose? And it's not necessarily like we just have to stick with one thing our entire life. It's almost like we have been given so many talents and gifts and those can be used in 50 ways. And it's just kind of figuring out in different seasons of life how we're going to use those. And it sounds like you have very much done that of like, I've done different things at different times, even talking about your podcast that like you started and then you pulled away from, and then you kind of got back into it. And just for me, that just like gives me so much like calmness and peace to know that once I start something, I don't have to just race 100 miles an hour until the last day of my life. Like it's okay to just take something a season at a time and to press pause or to go back or to, and I don't know, that just gave me a lot of like peace while reading your book.
I think there's something about, of course, I've never lived in another country and I love living in America, but I do think we are very like, Enneagram 3, like we got to be driven. We've got to be productive. We've got to be purposeful and work in your passion. And I think that there's a lot of that gets, spoken over us as these young, 20 somethings and entering into the world and trying to figure out where we belong. And I think it's really easy to put all this pressure on, I've got to like have this grand purpose in life and I've got to have this like passion and I got to do that for my work. When sometimes what I've learned, I'm 45 now, what I've learned is sometimes, work is just work and you've got to pay bills and you've got to make a living. And sometimes that's okay to just work a job for work, even if it's not your purpose. And so there's been a lot of shifting in my mind about that idea of purpose and coming alongside to see it as mattering. And you matter, even in small ways. You're the person that, makes coffee in the office for everybody. That's purposeful. You matter. Or like I had to, drive my dad to a couple of doctor's appointments yesterday. You know what? Like I mattered. If I wasn't here, he would not have been able to go. Like that was me mattering. That was purposeful. And so I do feel like when we can make that shift around purpose to how do I matter? Like what are the small, ordinary things that I do that show that I matter? I think that that's a good shift for those of us who have, like we've got to like do this big thing. We got to stick with it and go full force and hustle and all of that. We just need to boil it back down to something smaller to go, how do you matter today? And start there. And, and if your work happens to coincide with what you love to do, that's an amazing unicorn. That doesn't always happen for everyone. And that's okay. It's okay either way, but just like not putting so much pressure on ourselves to have this grand purpose in life of why I exist in this grand way. Maybe you exist in just these small, ordinary ways of mattering.
I just hope that this is like the most calming and encouraging podcast episode for the listeners to listen to, because the bottom line is you do matter. Like that's not a question. Like if you are on this earth alive right now, you matter and you have a purpose in it. Now, where we go from that is where it gets muddy and tricky of feeling, what are we doing? But down to it, you taking your dad to the his appointment the other day, like that mattered and that was purposeful and you needed to do that in that time. That was so meaningful. I'd love to go back and start at the beginning of your book. And I also want to say the tagline to it is an honest guide to the questions that keep you up at night. We all are kept up at night about something, or we're all going throughout our day. It was kind of the trending thing to say is like, what is your Roman Empire, of like, what are you constantly thinking about? But we all have that. So I would love to know the very beginning of the book, like, why did you even write this book? What was the purpose behind you being like, this is a message that's not just for me, but I need to write it down and give it to other people?
The book was really coming out of this post, what we just mentioned kind of in the beginning, that post like shut down years. Like we had come out of that. We had moved. My girls started new schools. We were back in a new city. All this change. I had, written A Mother's Guide to Raising Herself in the middle of lockdown. And then that came out and all of this change was happening. And I just found myself in such a state of burnout. And I was miserable. And people would say like, oh, are you like happy that you moved? And I was like, yeah, but I could feel myself dying inside. I missed where we were from, all this stuff. And I just kept thinking about it. And usually I was thinking about it at 3 a.m. I'd wake up and then I would it was almost like I had a Rolodex of what do I want to worry about tonight? And I would just flip through it and think, let's worry about how no one likes me. Let's worry about how everybody seems happier than me. Let's worry about whether I matter or not. And I just was spinning on all of these ideas and all these questions and wondering. And really at the heart of it, I was going, I just don't feel happy. I don't feel happy. And as I dug even deeper, I really think that I didn't feel connected. Like I didn't feel connected to people. I didn't feel connected to myself. Felt very unsure of myself, And so that really sort of sparked this, I don't know, I guess a journey really. And I stopped the podcast because I just was like, I just need some space mentally and emotionally. And I only need to do the things that are absolutely required. So the things that I am on the hook of for income, that's what I did. I stuck with that. And then everything else fell to the wayside as far as like, because the podcast was like this meaningful at one time. It was so fun. And I did it because it was meaningful and fun. And then I was like, oh, well, I just need a break. And so I just kind of went back to the things that made me happy. And I started making sure that I built in connection points for myself and with other people. And so after about a year of that, that's when I started pulling together all of this and going, I really feel like I want to write a book about all the questions that kept me up at night. And, it's not for sure 3-step process. Like if you just do these 3 things, you will always be happy. It's not that. It's more of a like, hey, this is a guide. These are things that I did that helped me build a little bit of happiness into my life and definitely more connection in my life as it relates to all of these questions that were keeping me up every night.
There's so much, I think, maybe good from just, Googling and having the 3-step process, but it just pales in comparison to having a resource from somebody who's like, hey, this is my real life story. And here's how I navigated the thoughts and the loss of sleep and just the anxiety and the questions. This is what I did. Here's what worked. Here's what didn't. Here's an option for you. Like just the vulnerability in that, like you have to be so vulnerable to write what you wrote. I mean, basically the whole book is just you talking about your life and your personal story. And one thing I think is really fascinating is it sounds like you might have grown up very similar to the way I grew up. I was in a Christian school. We had youth group on Wednesday nights. My summers were filled with missions trips. I graduated. I went to a Christian college. And I'm so grateful that I was just in this like Christian like greenhouse for the whole first years of my life plus. But I think it can get tricky because while we can hold on to our faith, and I believe, and I think you believe, like our faith and the relationship with the Lord that we have is like the most important thing in his plan for our lives. We are still human beings with human emotions and human circumstances and bad days and loss and grief and death and all of these things. And so there is a difference, and this is me just kind of like thinking as I'm talking, but like there is a difference between happiness and joy. I do believe that. And while we are told as Christians to chase true lasting joy, I do believe that there is also an element of it's okay to be happy. And if we're not, what can we do to help ourselves get to that point? Because honestly, I am fueled to do my work better when I'm feeling good. So it kind of all works together. And I think it's okay to not swing 100% one direction or the other. I think it's okay to have like a balance. So I don't know if you have any follow up to that, but that's just kind of what's circulating in my mind.
For sure. I think happiness is an emotion just like any other emotion. Like we're going to feel happy. We're going to feel sad. We can feel content. We can feel discouraged. We can feel all these different things. And so there's not the enemy. And it doesn't mean, and so for me, it's going, gosh, how can I build more into that? I don't live in a state of Zen all the time. Like even this morning had total chaos this morning dealing with my daughter to the point where I was like, I'm not going to be able to hop on a podcast. I am like my emotions are all up here. I'm just like, that certainly was not anywhere near feeling happy. Right. But it's like you can work your way into this ebb and flow of it. So when I was in that state, I reached out to a friend. So this friend and I, while we live in the same town, we Marco Polo each other all the time. And so had a conversation with her over Marco Polo in the hour before I had to hop on a podcast. And it was that like connection to her, reaching out when I was feeling overwhelmed and mad and frustrated and stressed. And just talking to her helped build in some of that happy. So I do think it's one of those where it's like, searching for happiness doesn't negate your faith. It doesn't negate any of that. It just is a part of life. It's an emotion that we all feel. And I do feel like we want to feel more of it in this state. And so how can we find little happies along the way to build into our day so that we feel more at peace and more connected in this world?
And I think you totally hit the nail on the head when you're like, and for me, that meant jumping on Marco Polo. I love Marco Polo. Like my friendships. And here's the thing, I don't like advertise, and now I'm talking about it on a public podcast, but I don't really like advertise that I'm on Marco Polo because to be honest, I do not have the bandwidth to have 50 people on Marco Polo. I have
2.
Yes, same. I think I have 3, maybe 4 girlfriends on Marco Polo, but I'm never talking to all 4 at the same, like it's still kind of in its seasons, but that lifeline of just community of like, I know this person and there's others not on Marco Polo who I have a great relationship with as well. But like just knowing that you have that community right there for you. I mean, that is a game changer. So if you don't have that, get that, whether that's Marco Polo or just a friend.
Phone a friend. Phone a friend.
Phone a friend. Yes. Okay. The chapters, I want to read off just the chapter titles of your book because, and as everyone is listening, if you identify with any of these, read the book. And what's going to happen is people are going to be like, yes, 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 yes. Okay. Here they are. Is everyone happier than me? Will I always feel stuck? How do I live in the in-between? Does anyone like me? Will my family be okay? What if? Do I matter? Do I still believe in this? Why don't I feel like myself anymore? What can I do to ease my stress? Sarah, that's a lot.
I know, right? Clearly I had a lot of sleepless nights.
No, but it's so real. And like, I don't know. I feel like personally, I have gone through this. It's not even a midlife crisis, but just this, the past month has just been this like intrusive thought of like, what is my life? What am I doing? Why am I here? Like I have had more of these deep thoughts now than ever, which is why it's such a godsend that I'm talking to you today and read your book because I needed so much of just, I mean, you make comments of like, it might be time to quit something. It also might not be time to quit something. It might be time to pause something and just reevaluate. And just the like fluidness of life is not black and white and it's different for everyone and everyone's journey. Was there a particular chapter in your book that was like the most difficult for you to write or like the most like dagger of a chapter for you to write?
I feel like the one like that talks about, well, I always feel this way. Like I don't feel like myself because I feel like this is ebb and flow. I really sort of feel like we all become middle schoolers again at different points in life, right? Like my middle schooler, especially when she was in 7th grade, was asking these questions of like, who am I? Does anybody, I mean, it's literally the same questions I'm writing in my book. Do I matter? Like, is everybody happier than, I mean, she's saying all the same things. And so I feel like we go through these seasons. Like, I think leaving college is another one of those middle school moments, those middle school seasons. I think if you become a mom and it thrusts you into that again, I think coming into your 30s, I just feel like it's this whole ebb and flow of coming back into that. But being in my 40s, especially around 42, I just really started feeling invisible. And so I felt like all the things that I struggled with as like a middle schooler, like someone turned the dial up for me again with that. And so it was really hard, I feel like, to write about some of those things of just, how I view myself. And because you're like, I'm 45, I should have this figured out by now. Why am I still worried about what people think about me? But it's true. I still worry about what people think. I'm still a work in progress on this one. So I feel like that one was very vulnerable. In fact, that was the one that I'm probably have spent the most time in therapy about. And so that really did feel like opening up my therapy sessions and going, this is just what I'm wrestling with. And this is how I feel. And gosh, I just feel invisible. And, I feel busy, but bored in life, where you're like, I'm busy and my schedule is full, but why do I just feel bored in all that I'm doing? So I feel like that one was a very vulnerable chapter to write for me, for sure.
Okay, I have like 3 follow-up questions. Let me see if I can remember all 3 of them. So at what point, and maybe this is different for every person, but like when you're sitting in therapy, let's say, and you're talking through this, at what point is it okay to write about? Because I feel like I've read things from people that's like, they talk about 10, 15 years ago when this has happened, and then they're talking about what they've learned through it. And so it's just a reassuring read of like, look how they got through that journey. And then I've read things from people that it's like, hey, I'm right now going through X, Y, and Z. And it almost feels like, have you lived through it enough? Like, you're very much still living in it. So it's not that I don't trust what you're saying, but it's also like your emotions are at a high right now. And I just don't know if what you're saying is as rational as it could be. So like, what is that level of, you want it to be relevant enough so that you remember it to write about it, but you also want to give yourself time to have lived it, to work through it. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it depends. So there's part of that. But I think that's why it's important to have people in your life that are reading it that can go, ooh, I don't know that this is the time to share that yet. Or you still got work to do. Like having people, read into what you're saying. I have a mentor, and she's been my mentor since I too worked summer camps when I was in college. So she became my mentor then. So I was probably 20, and it's looked different over the years, especially because we haven't lived in the same city in a long time. But I can remember when I started the podcast, and my girls I think they were like 5 and 7 or 4 and 6. It was somewhere in that young years. And I remember her pulling me aside and saying, hey, like, I think you need to like check how you're talking about your girls. Like, one, I know that this is hard. What you're walking through is so hard, but one day they will listen to these episodes. Like one day they will have access to hear what you said. So just be mindful. And it was such good, like, pause for me to go, oh, you're right. Like, yes, because I want more than anything to connect with the listener, to connect with you so that you feel understood and heard and seen. I want that so badly. But I was doing that at the sake of maybe my daughter listening to something, 15 years down the road and going, gosh, my mom thought that about me, or she was thinking, and so it was like, oh, you're so right. This isn't the time to share that, or to share it in that personal way, or to give names or any of that kind of stuff. So I do think there's that fine balance, but I had that because I had someone that was speaking into that for me. So I think that's the best way that I know how, is to let someone else in along the way that's listening. If you're a podcaster talking, or if you're a writer that's writing, to let someone in that knows you so well, that you value their thoughts and opinions and can speak into that for you.
That's so good. It's just like, it's a matter of wisdom. And again, it's like bringing people into it through prayer and just being like, is it time to say this? That's so interesting too, just thinking about it on a children's perspective, or even like a spouse perspective too, of you're being honest, but also is it the time? And what is the wisest call on that? The other thing I was thinking through was, I feel like I heard I don't remember who, but I was listening to a psychologist on a podcast maybe a couple years ago. This was not super recent, but they were just talking about how like the normal like lifespan of a human, it happens in seasons, which I feel like we see, like we have physical seasons happening outside, and like that change is good. And it's good to have night and day and winter and summer, but our lives happen in more often than not like a 5-year season. And so it's like you kind of look at the trajectory of your life. And of course, this is not true for every single person, but like I look at my life and like you have those early childhood years, middle school years, high school years, college years, figuring out your career years. And so I feel like I am right now, I'm 31, I'm not yet married. And so I think a little bit of my panic that I've had recently is, okay, am I just doing this for 60 more years? Like, is this what it is? Because I don't have graduation to look forward to. I would love to be married, but there's no man in the picture right now. I would love to have a family, but I need the man. So it's like, I want these things, but there's no deadline like there used to be. And there's no last day of school like there used to be. So I think that is maybe where I started to spiral, was when I was like, well, at this point, there's no more deadlines. It's just keep going. And that just feels really, as an Enneagram 7, it feels trapping for me. I'm just like, is this it? Because this feels very trapping and I need more than this. So I don't know if you have any advice on that. Like, now I'm in my own therapy session with you. What can you tell me?
I bet you feel exhausted because it's like this wrestling with that unknown of, well, I don't know when that end comes. When does that end come? Because I think you're so right about the seasons and I can look at, like, even when I started the podcast, I started in 2015. And by 2018, that's 5 years, I was already going, okay, I'm wondering if it has hit its like completion of what it was. And that's when I started really wrestling. And of course, I didn't end it then, sort of made a little bit of a pivot. And then I eventually made a pause in 2021. And then I've launched it back because I want to make sure that I'm connecting with people while the book is coming out and they can hear. And so it makes so much sense, that timeline that you talked about. And so I think, I wonder if there's a way of always, I don't know, having some moments of completion. And I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what that looks like for you.
Almost creating it for myself.
Yes, exactly.
Like, I know in 2 weeks, I am going on an exciting trip with a friend and I'm really excited. So it's like, okay, well, what is the work I can do up until that point? And I know in June, I'm going on this trip. I love trips. I love going places, but like almost like having things on the calendar that I am just putting there to almost give myself deadlines in a way.
Yes. Something to see, like you're seeing something out. And yes, it might not be, oh, I'm getting married in 7 months. And that's like the end of this season, but almost like shifting it and creating these little moments of like complete, like this little box completed in this time frame. I wonder if that would help you feel less trapped, that you've got like these things, it's not this endless, like, because it's almost like that's the beauty of milestones, right? That's what you essentially were saying with growing up. You had each one of these milestones I crossed. It's like I need little milestones still so that I feel like I'm moving forward and not just standing in this one spot, spinning my wheels and not getting anywhere.
Yeah. That's so fascinating. Like, I'm just thinking all this in real time because like my siblings have kids. And so it's like each year of their babies and kids' lives, like that is its own milestone. Then they go to kindergarten. And of course, like my niece going to kindergarten is not my sister's life, but that is a big part of her life. And so for me, it's like, okay, well, I don't have a kid going to kindergarten. So it's like, what can I create while I wait or just do the next thing? And so for me, I'm very career focused because that's what I have. I have been given my photography business. I've been given this podcast. I've been given another podcast that I'm hosting. Like, I have been given different things, but I guess it's just like, okay, well, am I just doing all of this for 50 more years? And it's like, no, not necessarily. Like, you just kind of go with it.
Right. It may not. Right. You may make a major change and pivot in a different direction. I feel like if you can hold it like that.
That feels so freeing.
Yeah. Like that's what I was gonna say. If you hold it like that, I think you're going to feel a lot more free. And then you just start building in those things about your life. Like you're already building these things in your career that make you feel like you matter, that bring you a lot of sense of like accomplishment and gratification. And then it's like, okay, how can I build pleasure into my world too? Like that's your travels and those things. It's like I'm building those in. Like those are the ebb and flows. Those are really the things that, yes, we want that. I know you want that marriage and that like companionship and build that family, but how can I build all of these things, kind of what you're doing along the way, and hold that and then go, okay, like I'm going to enjoy that while I have it.
That's so good. That's like so freeing. Well, thanks for giving me that therapy advice. I will bill you when we stop recording. Okay. Was there any part of your book that when you were writing it, you had like a new revelation or something that you learned, or even like just like this current conversation, how it almost like brought light to me and now I feel good. Like as you're writing it, you're just like, oh, this is it. Was there any like moment like that while or after you wrote it?
Gosh, I feel like so many things, like even now, like I believe it was, I can't remember if it was, I think it's chapter 2 in the book when I talk about feeling stuck and I talk about perfectionism. I feel like as I wrote about perfectionism, but I feel like since probably in the last 6 months, I have been just doing a lot of internal work around perfectionism. Not like even when I wrote the book, I was like writing it and still like going, oh, I think I just scratched the surface on that in my own life of what that looked like. And so I ended up doing, people who order the book, I created a 3-part deep dive podcast series on perfectionism because I'm learning so much about it. And so side note, if you buy it, go to sarahbragg.com/happy, enter your order number and you can get the series. But I'm just learning so much about showing up flawed and brave and just going, okay, like this is me. And that, like, I feel like I was scratching the surface in the book. And that is one of those where I'm like, oh, there's just so much here that I am such a work in progress about, and learning so much about showing up as I am. And that's a hard thing, I think, for a lot of us to go. I'm afraid that if I show up this vulnerably, will people like me? Will they want to be my friend? And so I do feel like that is one of those things, that perfectionism that I spoke about in the book. I've been doing a lot more reading and a lot more like introspective work about that and digging a little deep about that in my own life.
I don't remember if this is in your book or in another place, but of just like the whole concept of comparison is that we don't feel purpose in ourselves. So we have to then like leech on to someone else. But then the way to break that is through creativity. And I thought that was mind blowing of like, okay, well, when I feel in a low, and it's so silly because it's so simple. I don't feel the motivation and I'm having all these questions. It's put the phone away, get off of social media, and be creative. Think of something to do. Go outside, take a walk. Just that mindset of stop internalizing everything from what you are looking at and absorbing, and just be still with yourself and look for opportunities to be creative. So good.
Well, and compare and compete is what I feel like happens. So we take our own unique person of who we are and maybe what we've created, and then we compare it, and it just immediately makes us feel like we need to compete. Like, oh, it should be better, or I need to beat them at this thing, and we got to do this. And so much of it is because we live in a culture that values productivity. And I love to be productive, and I love to be efficient, and I love to win. And so like, no wonder if I get on social media, I immediately start feeling that angst. And so for me, it took going, no, like instead of compare and compete, I need to create and celebrate, like I need to create some things, not for the sake of productivity, right? Not for the sake of achievement, but just for the sake of creating stuff, because that is my unique expression into the world, is my own creativity. And so for me, when I feel that like comparison, the compare and compete, like dialing up, I have to, in order to dial that down, I need to dial up my own creativity and the celebration of other people, and just lean into that more than the comparison.
And the beauty of it is when you're creative, like that is showing the uniqueness of you that no one has. So just the fact that you're celebrating that is in itself good and I am a big hobby person. I love hobbies. I have sourdough upstairs right now that I need to go put in the oven. Like, I love it. But I do think it is a struggle for people because they're like, oh, well, I have this new thing. Oh, I'm actually really good at it. Oh, I should find a way to monetize this. And it's like, we don't have to make businesses out of everything.
Yes. I keep wondering, I wonder if that is the kiss of death of being an American. I don't know. Like, that's what I'm like, is if I lived in another country, would there be this same push to like every interest that I have to become my way of making income, which full circle comes back to our conversation about passion and purpose, that we think we have to force everything that we love to do with our time to be the way that we make money, when sometimes it just needs to be for the sake of, we do this because we love to do this, and it doesn't have to make money. We can just let it be our creative thing.
That's so good. That's so, so good. Tell everyone how they can find you and this book, where they can get it and everything.
Yes. Well, on Instagram, I'm Sarah W. Bragg, Bragg. And then my website is sarahbragg.com. You can buy the book anywhere you want to buy your books from. It'll be there. It's everywhere. And again, if you want that deep dive into perfectionism, when you buy the book, go to sarahbragg.com/happy and put your order number in, and you can have access to that podcast.
That's so generous that you did that. That's so cool. I will 100% be doing that. Sarah, was there anything else that we have not talked about that you would like to mention or talk about?
No, you have covered all. You were such a fun conversation. Like, I love it. I love going, like, I don't know, seeing where we go and going deep and vulnerable and honest. So it was a fun conversation.
I mean, we could just keep talking for forever, but I got to be respectful of your time. Well, I do have one final question for you that I ask all of my guests, because the show is called Love That For You. What is something that you are loving right now?
Okay, can I say like more than one thing, or is it like one thing that I'm living?
100%.
Okay, when I thought about this, the first thing that comes to mind is Black Honey Almost Lipstick from Clinique. Have you gotten into this? I first discovered this in 1996 when I was a senior in high school, and then it has come back. It has made a comeback, and I love it. It's called Black Honey Almost Lipstick by Clinique. Love it.
Are they color tinted, or is it just like a...
No, it's just, and I think there's only 2 different colors they have. I swear it looks good on everybody. So highly recommend that. And then...
We love a hydrated lip.
Yes. And I have really been into sports documentaries. Like, I know this is full circle with like my love of baseball, but I've been walking on the treadmill and I will watch a sports documentary. So like the Breakpoint, the tennis one, because I play tennis. I love that one. F1, Drive to Survive. And I'm currently in Beckham. I love it so much.
So I'm currently watching through Full Swing, the golf one. Have you seen that one?
No, I was going to add it to my list.
Yeah, it's good. I also, a year ago, started getting into golf and really love it. So I'm like soaking it up. And then, have you seen The Last Dance?
No, is that the one with about Michael Jordan?
It's Michael Jordan.
Yes, that's on where I need to figure out where to watch that one.
I think it's on Netflix.
Is it? Oh, I hope so. I definitely need to watch that one. Well, on some of those, I was waiting for my husband to watch because he had expressed interest. And then I was finally like, bye, I'm going to watch it by myself because you're too slow. So, and then I just love fiction. I love to read fiction. So that has given me a lot of life these days.
What genre?
Well, I love, what do they call it? Like modern romance, like Emily Henry, Christina Lauren, all those authors are just like this great witty banter. I love a good rom-com feel, you know, like I love things to wrap up in a bow. I don't like to be depressed in a book. Don't need that in my life. I just need all the happy feelings I can feel when I'm reading. So those are my favorite kind to read. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. I am not, like I said, I'm not a huge reader, but when I find something I love, the whole world gets put on pause and I can't quit it. So I'm always looking for something fun to read. So I'll have to go look up those authors. Well, let me tell you what I'm loving right now. I don't always do this, but I feel like it's appropriate for what we're talking about too. And it's been like a real life staple in my life recently. Have you heard of Fluid, FLEWD?
No.
It's a bath salt. And they have, I think, 4 different ones, but it's like magnesium, like the magnesium glycinate, whatever. I've been taking a lot of magnesium. They have like a stress relief one. They might have an energy one. They have one called insomnia. And I'm telling you, if you take a bath in it, within like 30 minutes, you will be asleep and you'll sleep all night long. Like don't quote me 100% on that, but like that has been my experience. And they smell amazing. You can get like on a subscription service. It's so good.
Okay. I'm going to have to look it up. I haven't heard of it, but I'm all about that magnesium too. It's great.
All that and the herbal teas. I'm just like, give it all to me.
Anything to keep us sleeping through the night. We don't need to be up worrying about all these questions in the middle of the night.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Well, Sarah, this has been so fun. Thank you so much for just taking some time out of your day to chat with us and share about your book. I can't wait for everyone to buy it. And seriously, everyone listening, buy a copy for your best friend, buy a copy for your mom, for your sister. Like, this is a great one that everyone needs to read.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Like, this makes my day.
Oh, I'm so glad. All right. Well, thanks. It's been so fun. Thanks for listening to this episode, friends. If you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share the love with your friends and family. Remember, life is all about the stories we create and share, so let's keep spreading inspiration and positivity. See you next week.